Welcome everyone to Wonderland at the Quilt Show, where we would like to invite you to a Mad Hatter coloring party, where we're going to introduce you to Tweedledee and Tweedledun. Up next, stick around. It's a new day for quilting with your co-hosts on the Quilt Show, Alex Anderson and Ricky Timms.
Welcome to the Quilt Show, everyone. And audience, welcome. Thanks for coming today. I am really excited about today's guest.
Well, it's so fun when we have people back that wowed us the first time.
Exactly.
And now we're going to get wowed again, no doubt.
It's a wonderland of creativity today. You just wait and see. And Ricky, actually, you're going to start off the show. And what you're showing is very traditional, but also it's a wonderland of
creativity and possibilities, absolutely. Well, as many of you know, I used to want to be an art quilter. I just wanted that label. I have to tell you, when I finally became true to myself, I kind of label myself as a contemporary quilter. I have one foot in tradition and another foot over on the art side, and I just love living, riding the fence, so to speak. But I want you to look at some traditional quilts. These are baby bunting quilts, and this first one that I'm showing you is from an exhibition that I saw of antique quilts that was put together by Mary Kerr. And this particular quilt is red, white, and blue, and I even love the fact that it's so old that on the left side and across the top, you can see that the red has faded. It's no longer, it must have been a different fabric.
Right.
It just didn't stay red.
Right.
But this block is called baby bunting, and the block itself is made out of 16 repeated units. And that's what I'm going to go to today. So look at the block itself. That's the next slide that we're going to look at. This would be kind of a dark navy, white, and a red version of that. So it's very similar to the quilt that you just saw. But also in the exhibition, there was this quilt. Let's take a look at it. This is a wonderful blue and white baby bunting quilt.
Look at the quilting on it.
Absolutely. It's gorgeous.
Yeah.
And this is a circa 1920. The previous one was more like 1915. This is about 1920. But also notice that the block was turned on point. So many times we forget that option. But it's two fabrics. It's very straightforward, very simple, very traditional. And yes, it allows the quilting to sing. So now look at the next one. This is the block. Sorry, this is the block. And then now look at the next one, and you'll see this is a large quilt, but it's just huge units.
That's the whole thing?
That's the whole quilt.
Wow.
It's like 60 by 60 or 65 by 65. This one's done with wool. Those plaids are wool. All of the fabrics are wool. This is from the collection of Virginia Berger. And I don't want to forget that the previous quilt was from the collection of Laurie East.
Okay.
So those are important to kind of give credits to. But all of those inspired me to do what I'm going to show you today. So let's break it down and look at the units. So what I'm providing, and anyone that's on the Quilt Show can get a download, it actually will be a page that has two blocks on it, or two of the units on it, and each of the units are going to repeat it.
Great.
So I've cut it out, and you can see there's going to have to be some paper piecing. Now, no, it doesn't have to be. You can hand piece it. Yeah, look at maybe not. But you could. That's what was done back in the day. But I'm trying to make it simple. So when people think about paper piecing, part of the problem is that there's so many odd shapes and they don't get put on right, or they get upside down. Well, I can tell you if you use hand-dyed fabric, nothing ever gets on upside down. So that will simplify is one thing. Batik fabrics are kind of the same.
Solids.
Solids would do the same. But let's talk about preparing things, because if you prepare it, it will go faster. So I'm going to be having two units here, and two little bits. From these little bits, I'm going to have a wider wedge and a spikier wedge, all right? So what I'm going to do is I've decided that I'm going to cut strips that are 2.5 inches wide. And looking at this, I could put this on. I'd like to have far more than 1/4 inch. I want to be generous.
Yes.
I want to be generous when I'm doing paper piecing. So I could use this template and just cut a hefty, perhaps 1/2 inch on each side and just zigzag it back down the way. What I started also doing with these is I cut them at 30 degrees. Now you can see that 30 degrees goes a tad wider.
And that is just fine.
But if you want to use your ruler and do 30 degrees, if you want to just lay this down and cut and rotate it and cut. You can make a stockpile of the wider triangles, and that's a good thing to do.
Okay.
For the smaller wedges, I decided to cut 2.5 again, 2.5 strip, but then I cross-cut it into 2 inches.
Okay.
And here's the thing. This is not what I'm going to do. I'm actually going to tilt it because I don't care so much about the straight of grain. And I realized that if I do this, if I just take my rotary cutter, and I don't even need a ruler to do this, I can leave about 1/2 inch at the bottom, guide myself to about 1/2 inch at the top, and just cut an angle. And that yields me the little wedges that I'm going to need that are perfectly ready to go. There's
Okay,
plenty
there
of
you
seam
go.
allowance for that. So I'm trying to be quick with that. There's 2 other pieces in the unit. There's the arc, and I decided these could be 3-inch squares, so I
Okay.
can pre-cut those, and that's going to be enough for those applique. And to be really efficient with fabric for this unit, I've cut this 5x6.
Okay.
And you can see it's going to, with hefty seam allowance, that's going to yield 2 pieces out of each
What's
one
the
of
finished
those.
size of that?
This is a 4-inch. This is a 4-inch,
Okay.
4.5 unfinished,
Right,
but it's a
right.
4-inch unit. So the block would be 16 by 16.
Whoa,
Because
okay,
there's
yeah.
there's
Yeah, yeah,
16
yeah, yeah.
units in the block. All right, so to piece this together, we're going to cut out very carefully. Now I do, literally, I'll show you what I do. I use my rotary cutter when I'm cutting this out. I stay right on the line and just simply drive, and I don't try to hurry. Just cut very cleanly. To me, it's cleaner than scissors.
Well, you know, too, and on the smaller arcs, you could just use a smaller rotary cutter, like Rob Shark.
Absolutely,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, absolutely. So when I begin now, I'm going to start with, I don't know how to triangle. I'm going to start by putting a bit of glue on the fabric, and I'm going to work from the center out. It just works better for me. I'm going to position this in.
I like that. I like that.
Well, it's going to keep the bulk over here at the seam being a little bit more reasonable. So here I've got this working from the side out, and I'm now going to start with my my spiky units, and here's what you need to know. The point of the spike is going to go towards the point of the spike.
Mm-hmm.
So, but we're working upside down. So we know this has got to go here, but it's really got to go under here.
Right.
And I have to think, well, it has to be on this line. So what I do is I just play peekaboo, and wherever the point is near here,
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to say I favor the point edge because I would rather have more fabric down at the bottom because I need more real estate in fabric. So once I put this on, and a lot of people play the hold it up to the light game, but here's what you need to know, everyone. As long as you have the starting point, I'm going to play peekaboo, as long as you've got the starting line with enough seam allowance, let's go to the machine with a straight stitch. The straight stitch has been dialed down to about a 1.5 because I do want a smaller stitch for this. And when I start stitching, I'm going to stitch just a couple of stitches. And then if I want to put the needle down, I can now play the peekaboo game. So I can swivel this piece now so that that line from the paper comes where I want it to go.
Okay.
I don't have to be holding it up to the light. So I'm going to stitch that and then cut it out. Go ahead, cut.
I like that peekaboo.
And let's go back over because now I'm going to fold the paper back. Mm-hmm. I do not need a 1/4 inch.
I was just wondering, I didn't see the add a quarter.
No,
I love that thing.
I just need to trim.
I know.
All right.
But look how small you did that.
But it's not crazy small.
Yeah.
I mean, it might be 3/16. I haven't cut 1/8 of an inch. I mean, I don't want it to be ridiculous. And then open it over, fold it over, finger press that, and now we're ready for a bigger triangle. So I go to my stockpile of bigger triangles, and again, I'm looking at where the point is going. It's coming down. I have a blunted point. Oh, by the way, when I'm cutting these guys, I didn't say this before, I leave about 1/2 inch up at the top.
Okay.
I don't want it to go directly to a point. I leave about 1/2 inch between those, so there is a blunted top. So this is where it's going to fit, but because it's hand-dyed fabric and I don't care about the right side or wrong side, I'm just going to come, the point is down here, I'm going to lay this on. Again, I'm going to favor towards the pointed end and leave a little more on the non-pointed end and continue to sew this.
Are you going to peekaboo it?
I will, yes. So what I'll do is I'll start with a couple of stitches. I might put my needle down, and then I can raise the project up and double check that this is coming towards me, that when I lay the paper down, I can see where that line is going to go in the seam allowance area. Because if it's over too far, all you do is swivel it and pull it right down. So there's no real worry. As long as you get the very start of it, you're ready to go.
Okay.
And this just flip and sew and flip and sew. And I think a lot of people understand about flip and sew. We would work it over to one side and then do the other side. So I'm going to say this would flip over, and you keep going. Now I want to show you the template from the other side. This is the big triangle, this is the big triangle, this is the big triangle, and this is half of the big triangle, all right? I just continue to use a big piece.
Okay.
I'm just going to trim that off later, all right?
The thing is the accuracy that you get is just beautiful, and so you sacrifice a little fabric.
Right. So this one is half done. If you look on the back side, I've done the middle, and I've done everything over, and this is that piece that's much wider than it needs to be. And then I would continue to do this till this entire little arc was all done. Now I've got the arc finished, and here's what it looks like from the back side, all right? So to trim this, I like to still be a little bit generous on the outside edges because I'm going to trim this block up. So by going a little bit generous and then coming in, and now I'm just going to eyeball what I think is something like a 1/4 inch seam.
Right.
I'm not actually going to piece this in as if it was a drunkard's path or something. You could, but I decided I can be much more accurate if I do not piece the arches on. I will actually applique them. So,
that is my preferred way to do this.
To do it, yeah. So what I've done here is I've prepared these, and I just want to show you how I prepared it. So I'm going to use, here we got one ready to go. I want to put a little glue stick, Alex, on, again, a hefty seam allowance on the outside, a little bit of glue stick. Of course, most people would cut that first before you do it, and that's what I should have done.
I was saying, Anne?
So I'll cut it now. But basically, I'm just going to run my rotary cutter around the edge of that with a small seam allowance, and I'm going to fold this back up and over to prepare that applique. So that was, I love the glue sticks that we have to do that. That's prepared, and you do the exact same thing with this one. You simply cut it. Now, I find that putting a little glue stick on the paper, just a little dab to hold it in place while you're doing this helps. All right, so now I'm going to go to sew this. I'm going to use glue stick to put it in place.
What did we do without those glue sticks?
I don't know, but this allows me to get it in place and to have my perfect points.
Yeah.
I know that I'm not going to bite into that more than I need to. I'm actually going to go ahead and put glue stick on this one as well so that I can show the whole block, and we'll go over and stitch that. Everybody's holding their breath, and so am I. Okay.
I'm
That's
in
what it's gonna
love
look
with
like.
what you're doing, and it's how I handle
Now,
my things.
I'm using the blind, not the blind hem stitch. I'm using a blanket stitch, just a single blanket stitch, and I've set it to a 0.7 wide. It's the smallest I could get to make it bite, and I'm using a 3.2 long. As I stitch this, I'm going to make sure my needle bites into it when it goes to the left, but the forward stitch is on the non-appliqued part.
Okay, so now I use the 20 foot, which has a wider opening, and this is the what
This is the number 8 foot, and I will tell you why I have loved this for this project. If you are able to see, well, and it's hard to see, but my seam is going directly into the opening of this foot, and I can see the bite as it comes through there.
I love that.
Yeah, it works beautifully. I am using a monofilament thread because I want this to disappear, and trust me, when this is quilted and
It's
done,
gone.
it
It's
is
gone.
so gone. And I have a regular thread in the bobbin, which means I've slightly loosened my tension on the machine so that I never see the bobbin threads coming up. But let's take a look at this now and just see what this looks like when it's done.
It's perfect.
It's gorgeous.
It's how I do it. It's beautiful.
And then I have to square it up to 4.5 inches, and here is the key for the whole thing. When I square this up, Alex, I want something to point with. I want this seam and that seam to be at 2 1/4. So I'm going to align this up so I find 2 1/4 and 2 1/4 here, and here.
Okay.
Okay? That's the critical thing because that's what you need to match when you put the blocks together.
Oh, okay.
And then once I've got that side done, flip it around, trim the other at 4.5, and the block ends up looking like this.
Now, you've brought some other examples, and I have to go through them very quickly.
Yep. So let's take a peek. This is the first one that I've done that's in plaids.
Look at that.
All right. And if you take that, yeah, stripes. And if you then take that into different colors, look what you can do. The possibilities. Woohoo! Yeah. Look at the next one. I had so much fun. This is the one we just did. And if you took that into a quilt, it could look like this. Stunning, fun stuff. Look at the next one. This is kind of happy. This is my purple green phase, right? But look what you can do. Now this is a quilt needs a border, so let's put a border on it.
Oh,
Okay?
yeah.
Now before we show the next slide, I want to say what's bothering me or the big sashing, the big blank sashing.
Okay.
So look what I did. Boom.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Now we're
All
talking.
right, so one more. This is crazy. Just go crazy wild. I'm thinking Karen Stone at this moment, right?
Right.
And now then look at what you can do. And those are offset blocks, so the possibilities are endless. And that's what I love, finding something traditional and then just running with it.
Well, you and I are on that journey right now.
Absolutely.
And
if you want to make this quilt, yeah, this is it.
well, but period, you get an old quilt and you make it contemporary and fresh.
Absolutely.
Well, talk about running with it. Katie Fowler was on our show a while back, and boy, she took us down the rabbit hole. And if you missed it, take a look at this.
All right, now I do want this to be fairly...
Why?
Wait.
OMG.
Okay.
Okay, I'm a little emotional right now. I mean, seriously.
I may get a little emotional.
Insanity. I will never forget that moment on the quilt show. Yeah, you don't just go cutting up quilts. Unless you're Katie Fowler, who's coming up next after the break. Don't go anywhere. Yeah, that was a moment.
Welcome back. Ricky, I just want to talk about the last segment for 1 second. I can remember when I was so fearful, hating paper piecing and not wanting to do it. And boy, my tune has changed. When you can see that you can do things like that, yes.
Well, and the nice thing is it's the same piece, so it's not that complicated.
Right.
I am so excited to have Katie Fowler on the show today. Aren't you?
Yes, I just did a little dance.
Cool. Look at the audience. And well, let's not waste any more time. Let's bring her in. Katie Fowler, welcome back to the Quilt Show.
Hello.
Hey, beautiful.
Good to see you.
Oh my gosh. I still have, I don't want to call them nightmares. I mean,
Moments.
yeah, I have moments. And what we're talking about was the section that you saw. But listen, if you have not seen Katie's previous show in entirety, Alex said it's a non-negotiable.
Oh, 1807. As soon as you watch this, just go watch that. It was a life changer for me. And I also want to fess up, she does not life coaching, but creativity coaching. And I worked with her, and she changed me personally.
That's what happened to you. Thank you so much, Katie. Thank you. That was so helpful. Well, what have you been doing since we were last on the show?
Well, I've been having a blast. I've been down the rabbit hole. I've been focusing on color. I developed a color wheel. We talked about it at my last show, and I went ahead and did that, and I've self-published it. And I've fallen in love with mandalas. So I started hand-drawing mandalas, and I started hand-drawing them small, and then I'd blow them up.
And you're using those in your quilts?
I'm using them in my quilts, and then I was introduced by Judy Alborn, introduced me to a program on the computer.
Right.
So I'm making mandalas now on the computer. And I've made mandalas out of traditional quilting patterns. So a black and white line drawing of a wedding ring quilt, for example, I've turned into a mandala. And
so there's a lot going on.
So I want to get at quilts because I know without people seeing it, they're like, what is she talking about? Yeah. But let's start with the first quilt, which is kind of a segue to the last show, correct?
Right,
Yes.
right.
Tell us about this, please.
Okay, so that is Mandelbrot in Wonderland, and I took an image of the quilt that I cut up before I cut it up, so an image of the whole quilt, and ran it through the program. So that's its most recent iteration of that.
So that's using that
quilt.
program?
That's using the program, yes.
Okay.
And then I had it printed on fabric, and Candy Stifler at the Quilt Vine in Maryland, Trapp, Maryland, did a beautiful job long arm quilting that for me.
I have to say, you know the song, this is the song that never ends. This is the quilt that never ends. Because you had the quilt, then you cut up the quilt, and then you make a new quilt from what you cut up, and now you've gone back to the photographs and you're making another quilt. I just can't wait to see the next one.
Well, and they're all beautiful. When you run them through that program, they're all just, some of them look real medieval, some of them look real funky, so you might see more.
That's great.
Well, let's take a look at the next quilt, please.
And this is the Convergency quilt?
Yes, well, that's Convergence in Wonderland, and that is a colored mandala. I had that printed, and then I colored it, which we'll talk about in the next segment, and cut it up, because that's what I do, is cut stuff up.
Yes, you do.
And I tried to, I'm not quite smart enough to make a real convergence quilt, but I cut the,
Trust me, you're far smarter than you give credit to.
okay,
That's easy.
maybe I can't follow directions.
Okay, all right, okay.
So I cut the mandala up in equal size strips, but I put them back together the way you do your convergence quilts, and it made just this stunning secondary pattern.
That's what I love about them.
I just couldn't get over it.
Fun. Now the mandala, that's the small one at the top. Let's talk about that.
Well, that's called Feed Your Mind, and that's a hand drawn, and you'll be able to see the difference when we look at some of the other mandalas, that doesn't have perfect symmetry and the shapes aren't all perfectly the same.
But I love it.
Well, thank you. I enjoy it.
Yeah.
And you can hand stitch these till till you drop. They're really fun to hand stitch. And we talked about last time embracing the blob. That's not a full circle because, don't tell anyone, but there's a blob. Oh. So I just cut the blob off.
But you also have a new mantra. Give yourself permission.
Give yourself permission, right.
And
Right.
expand on that just a moment.
Well, I was talking to someone several years ago after the book came out, and this woman kept saying, so you want people to color outside the lines, right? And I kept saying, no, I want people to do what they want to do. It's important to give ourselves permission to figure out what we want to do, and it's not always going to be the same. Someday I may want to just kind of throw that paint on and do an abstract thing, and there are other days. Recently, the last probably 9 months, I have had a blast coloring and staying inside the lines. So,
And it is being true to yourself. That's the message.
and you said it in the first segment when you said I always wanted to call myself an art quilter, and
I wanted to be something that I don't think my heart
and we
needed
can't,
to be.
right?
And that was the crux of our sessions that you gave with me on the phone. Be who you are and embrace it.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so the next one, please.
That's Tommy, Can You Hear Me? Named for the rock opera Tommy because it reminded me of a pinball
The
game.
pinball wizard.
Right.
Yes.
And those are my first run at using the computer program, which I'm going to demonstrate later, printing them on paper-backed fabric and coloring them.
Love it. Love it. Okay, and then we have another.
Yes, this one is Checkmate, and these are all
Wow.
mandalas made from traditional quilt patterns.
You're kidding.
So the one in the center is a wedding ring quilt.
You're kidding. Wow.
The one next to it, I believe, is Winding Ways, which I first learned about on Simply Quilts.
Left or right?
To the left.
Left
to the
of center?
Okay.
Left of center. The one underneath that is Tumbling Blocks. You'll be able to see that.
Wow, I do. How much fun. Well,
Oh.
I'm excited to learn about how that program works.
The program is fun, the coloring is fun, and I've got some paper-backed coloring sheets that we're going to get to play with.
But last but not least.
okay, sorry.
because I love this one. I mean, oh, wow.
This is my favorite one too, Down the Rabbit Hole, and those are some line drawings doodles, really, that I ran through the program and then blew up, traced onto the fabric, and colored in.
That is fabulous.
So-
Well, the color is wonderful, your exploration with color, but we're going to have a Mad Hatter coloring party when we come back, and that's what we're going to do. We're going to learn all about it. Oh, no, there goes Alex.
I'm ready.
All
I'm ready to
right.
go. Let's do it.
Don't go
No, we're
anywhere.
not gonna cut anybody's
We'll be
hair
right
off.
back.
Three sketchbooks full of ideas. 10 colored fabric pens. One trusted embroidery machine. One DesignWorks software suite for embellishments. 5 perfectly cut flowers. 250 glittering crystals. One dress as colorful as my imagination. Bernina DesignWorks software suite. Cutwork for all the shapes that your creativity can imagine. Paintwork for all the designs that you can picture. Crystal work. Easily add sparkle to your creations. Bernina DesignWorks software suite. Now available at your local Bernina store. Bernina, made to create.
Welcome back. If you're watching this, no doubt you're a quilter, and we love color. I mean, you walk into a fabric store and you just you go, whoa, and it's the color. But yet, there are a lot of people who are afraid of color. I want to take a look at these wonderful double wedding ring inspired mandalas or mandalas.
Mandalas.
That you have colored with pencils. Let's talk about them.
Well, I mentioned them in the first segment. I have taken a line drawing of a wedding ring quilt and run it through a program, which you're going to see in a little bit, to make mandalas. And they are paper-backed fabric. The paper stabilizes it while we're coloring, and then you peel the paper off and use it however you want. That's how I've done all the quilts we talked about earlier.
Okay, so I've got my beautiful box of pencils, which we'll talk about in a minute, and I've got my mandala to color, and now what do I put with what? And you've come up with this absolutely fabulous tool that's a cheat sheet.
It is a cheat sheet. And it's a tool, not a rule, so you don't have to follow it exactly, and it still works. And I went straight to the source. I went to Isaac Newton when I did some of my color research.
Okay.
And he split light through a prism, split white light through a prism, and came up with 5 colors. And then about 25 years later, he added the other colors.
Really?
Came up with 7 colors, and about 25 years later added the 5 others to come up with the color wheel that we use today, which has 12 colors.
Okay.
His theory was that if we spun the color wheel, those colors would turn, we would see white or a neutral gray.
What do you think?
Well, I don't know. I don't know what we would see. I do know if you, because he did this, I haven't, but Isaac Newton put the split colors back through a prism and they turn white again. So anyway, these, I have 10 overlays, and we're only going to talk about the first several, but they just illustrate color combinations that will always work.
Well, this is classic.
Right, that's a compliment, a direct compliment.
It works every single time. It's like a really good turkey Thanksgiving meal. It just works. So
Right, and they're opposite each other on the color wheel.
okay, so let's go back to this one. All right.
Right, so yellow, green, and red, violet. And you'll notice that I have some green in here that's not yellow, green, and I have some violet that's not red, violet, but it works.
Right.
So I always remind people, this is a tool. not a rule.
Right, and just you keep saying that, and it's true.
It is true, because you don't want to get hung up on it.
Right, right.
Now, I think this is your favorite combination. I've done all these samples starting with yellow-green just to keep it cohesive,
Okay,
and you can kind
okay.
of see the difference. So there is yellow-green, red-orange, and violet.
And that's spicy, like a Cajun meal. So let me just turn this just for fun.
Yeah.
I mean, look at that. It just doesn't get better than
Those
that.
are the primary colors.
Yeah,
Those are the 3
look at that.
primaries.
Woo.
And they all work.
Yeah, they do. You know, I have several color wheels in my workspace, and it's a go-to because I can't memorize all this stuff.
Well, and I can't memorize all this stuff.
Right,
I
right.
have to look, you know, I don't remember, some of them I do, but for the most part, I don't remember what's a complement of what. Okay, so that was a color triad.
Or triangle.
Or a triangle. This is a split complement. It also is 3 colors, but we take the first color and go straight across the color wheel to its complement and block that out and take the 2 colors on either side. And there's an example of a split complement.
That's a little more sophisticated than the other 2 we've just done.
Yes,
You know?
it is.
And that's that quilt over there, correct?
It is.
Let's go
yes.
take a look at that.
So this quilt has every color on the color wheel. And what I did was I started with 1, the red, and just took the 2, and then I worked my way around the color wheel. So every color on the color wheel is in this quilt in a split complement combination.
I love that.
And the reason it works is these are cohesive because they're all split complements.
Did you know that going into it, or was that a big surprise to you?
No, I didn't. It's all a big surprise to me.
That's right. Life is a big surprise.
I'm not a big planner.
Okay. Okay, and now this is, I haven't seen this before.
So this is a color tetrad, and this is a good example of it's a tool and not a rule, because I probably have too much yellow here. These next 2, I don't know how I got them goofed up, but I did. But it still works.
But look how happy that is.
Very happy.
All
And
these-
the yellow ends up being an exclamation point.
It does.
And that's why we want to use the color wheel as a tool, not a rule, because we can just pop the extra stuff in there and it works.
This is to die for. And this would be also not only for coloring, but you know, if you're working with solid fabrics and all that. Yes, ma'am.
Your clothes.
Yes.
Decorating.
Yeah.
I have an analogous colorway on
Yes,
today.
you do.
So, you know, if you're thinking about what color sweater or scarf to add to your clothes, you can use the color wheel. This is a double complement, and it's just 2 sets of complements, equally spaced.
And the other thing I want to say is that it's written on the back here, so
Right.
you don't have to remember all
It's
this stuff.
also on the back of the color wheel. But the names are really quite arbitrary.
But you didn't make them up.
Well, some of them I did make up.
Oh, did you?
Yeah.
Okay.
Some of them are, but they're arbitrary.
Is one called the Alex?
No, but it will be.
Okay.
I don't know how I didn't think of that.
Okay, so you have 10 in there, and then the other little thing that you came up with, I just love this, Katie, because this was in your mind when you came last time, and I think how it's presented is so beautiful.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, look what we also have here. If you don't want to take that to your fabric store, you've got little shopping guides that have the different colors in it and all that good stuff. Okay, so in the next segment, you will teach us how to make our own mandalas, but in the meantime, you've come up with this little coloring book. I mean, everybody's into coloring right now.
Right.
I've got so many pencils and all that, and I have coloring books, but I do not have a coloring book that's on fabric. I mean, don't you love that? So here, there's 4 in here, right? And then you can just color them however you want.
Right.
Which is what we're going to do right now.
Yes, and I have a ton of those coloring books, and every time I sit down to color, I think, this is going to be so fun, but what am I going to do with it? Not that we always have to do something with what we make, But I have had a blast with these because then you peel the paper off the back, and I've been fusing it to fabric, to felt, and you can make a quilt out of them.
Cool. Okay, so I own these. I've owned several of these. I've got big version, small version. Tell us about this particular pencil.
So this is a Derwent Inktense pencil, and it's basically a watercolor pencil. I have asked every expert I can find about the difference between paint and ink, and it's binding, but all inks have acrylic binders, and that's what paint has. So I really don't know the difference.
Okay.
So this is basically a watercolor pencil.
Okay.
Which means when we get it wet, it pops.
Well, let's take a look at this.
Okay.
Okay. So this side has just the pencil, and then this side has the it's been wet.
Yes.
And I do it with water, but you say that is better.
Well, the reason I prefer the aloe gel is because it doesn't run.
Oh, it binds it more.
Well, when you put water on fabric, it absorbs and it runs. So for this particular thing, I want to stay inside the lines. Last time we talked about I didn't care.
Right.
This time I want to stay inside the lines. So this just stays as still as I want it to stay.
Okay, I want you just to randomly pick out one of those. Don't even look. Just pick one out
Okay.
and bring it over, okay?
All right.
Not that. I want the color wheel thing. I don't want to copy you. I want to do my own thing.
Oh.
You
You
know?
want me to pick one of these?
Yeah, okay, and then I want the color wheel.
Okay.
Let's just put it this way. I want one of these things, okay? So, okay, I'm just going to, this is what I'm going to put it on. No, that's what you already did, right?
Okay.
No, let's do something else.
Okay.
Let's do that. All right. So now we go to our pencils.
Right, now here's a
Okay.
hint. I want to just give you a hint. You start with the fuchsia. I
Okay.
think that's, fuchsia.
Okay.
And I'm going to start with teal green. Now, the lighter your hand, the fewer lines you'll see when you hit it with the aloe.
Oh.
So that's important. So I want to just go in here, and I'm going to start kind of light and just do that. Now, I love shading with these. So I'm going to decide where I want the shading.
So you could like maybe make it a little darker towards the square.
Right, darker towards the square, or you do darker towards the square, and I'll do the inside of the arc.
Okay. All right.
And then here's the fun part.
I'm excited.
You can steal these little jam jars from the restaurant, and they're the perfect size for your aloe gel.
Okay.
Now pick a paintbrush. And I just use tiny little paintbrushes. I don't use expensive paintbrushes for the same reason I didn't on the last episode, and that is fabric tears them up. Some of mine already have frayed edges, and I'm just gonna paint over that. If you're shading, I always start with the light with the aloe because the brush will pick up.
Oh, and then go to the dark.
And then go to the dark. And you can push the dark into the light so it blends beautifully.
I think I need a smaller paintbrush. You got some babies in here.
I have some babies, and you find I've listed on the packaging which are my favorite paintbrushes.
Okay, perfect.
And then the cleanup is a piece of cake because you dip your brush back in the aloe and just kind of
That cleans it?
swab it around.
Can it be generic or
Yes.
just okay?
Yeah.
Cool.
Any aloe.
Cool. Okay. Well, while we go to break, I'm going to color. Do you mind?
I do not mind.
Okay. Now, coming up, we are going to show you how to make your own mandala. So it's easy, you promise.
I promise.
Okay? And we're going to give you some finishing techniques called Tweedledee, Tweedledone. Stick around. Let's trade things.
It's always fun to have Katie Fowler on the show. I'm so glad you're back. And I love that last segment with all the dynamic swirling. And I remember Spirograph, remember back in the
Oh,
day?
yes.
But you've got a computer program that helps make that happen that you want to share with everybody and tell them how easy that is.
I do want to. And thank you for the whole spirograph thing, because now I have to go home and try that. I could print that on fabric.
Absolutely.
So I learned about this program for Mac. Judy Alborn was telling me about one for PC, and it's called ScopeWorks, and it's $9.99 on the App Store. It only works on your computer. It won't work on your iPad or your phone.
Okay.
But
in this particular example, you've loaded in a double wedding ring. Right?
Right.
Because this is what we were talking about in your show and tell.
Exactly.
You said there was winding ways and double wedding ring, and this is where it came from.
Right.
So you've loaded in a double wedding ring line drawing.
I have. Now, with the line drawing, I can decide there are several different choices for how I want the image to look, and I can choose the number of wedges I have for the mandala. I can also manipulate the size of the wedge.
Whoa.
So I can make it very complicated,
Right.
and then I can also
Holy schmoly.
move the wedge. So I can really manipulate.
Okay, simplify for me.
Okay.
Yeah, simplify for me. Make it smaller.
Okay, yeah.
I couldn't color that. There we go. I'm
Okay.
happy now.
All right. Good.
Look
right
at
there.
that, though. See how quickly that happened?
Very quickly. And then I can change the angle of the wedge.
Oh, wow. So so that is how many wedges? You said 18?
That's 16.
That's 16. All right. Change it to 12, just for kicks and
Okay.
grins.
That's easy. Whoops.
Oops, not 122.
Not 112. That would be maybe a little. And then
Oh, and then look, it does it itself.
It will start animating. And
Wow. And now your...
I can put it on the screen by itself.
I think I could just sit there and
And
watch that for all day.
You can put your
Forget the quilting now. Just go somewhere.
You can put your headphones on and listen to Pink Floyd, and
There
it
you
works
go.
just
Okay.
great.
Well, even more so if we go to one of your quilts. So pop over to I'm sorry, I forgot the name of your
The
quilt.
Color of Infinity.
The Color of Infinity.
This is an image of the quilt I cut up last time I was here, and I've got it set to 16 wedges.
Okay. And there it goes.
There it goes.
And the quilt that you brought with us today is the permutation. You did that from this and printed that on cloth.
Exactly.
That is
right.
fabulous.
And that is a tile rather than a mandala.
Okay. Awesome.
But
Well, one of the things that I love about it is A, it's inexpensive, and B, you said it's dummy proof.
it is dummy proof, and if you were up here, well, you were up here. When I was trying to get this set up, you'll know that it's dummy proof because I proved that they were telling me which button I can push. And
Well, that's great.
so, yes, it's.
Well, I wanted everybody to see that. So thank you for going through that. But what we really want to do in this segment is talk about Tweedledee Tweedledone, and I don't yet understand what that means. So tell me what that means.
Well, it means that I have too many ideas.
I know.
And sometimes I like to put a traditional binding on and hand stitch it down, but mostly I'm too anxious to get on to the next idea. So
But you don't want to leave it unfinished.
I don't want to leave it unfinished.
So this is truly about just getting it done and calling it a day.
Right.
All right.
And I've given myself permission, which we talked about earlier, to not necessarily, I don't want my workmanship to be sloppy, but I'm not making quilts to enter in quilt shows.
And why?
Well, I always miss the deadline.
Me
It's a
too.
personality thing, probably. I mean, if we went back to my personality type, it probably would be a personality thing. But I miss the deadline. It ends up not being authentic, not feeling authentic. I end up making something for a purpose, and I'd rather just.
It's back to giving yourself permission to be who you are. And if
Exactly.
you want to enter shows, enter shows. And if you
Right.
don't want to enter shows, don't
Don't.
enter shows.
Exactly.
And how you choose to finish it is your choice. And that's what you're giving us
Right.
as permission.
That is-
So show us how to do
So-
this project.
So I want to talk about this project real quickly
Okay.
before we do the finishing. This is an applique from a wedding ring mandala, which I simplified, not one of my coloring sheets, because I am not an appliquer.
Okay.
In fact, I practically had a nervous breakdown over this.
Just trying to get it
Yeah,
all
yes.
fused in place, right?
Right. So But I could see someone who does beautiful applique work taking one of the more complicated coloring sheet designs and going crazy with some solids or some blendables. And I think it would be really stunning. Or even with commercial pattern
fabric. Yeah, sure, absolutely.
So I just wanted to show you that that's an option. I've fused this onto wool felt, which is my new best friend.
And that to me is an interesting fabric choice.
And why is that?
Because I don't use felt.
Okay.
So it's very interesting to me.
Well,
just being honest.
That's great.
I'm not poo-pooing it. I'm just saying I'm not using felt.
Right. It's unusual to mix the cotton fabrics with the wool felt, but I know Sue Spargo does that all the time.
Okay.
Usually people who are using wool felt are doing penny rugs and that kind of thing.
Okay, sure.
I like it because it doesn't fray. It's quick and easy. It's kind of it's a nice batting.
Yeah, it's sturdy.
It's sturdy,
right.
So this is a finishing technique I learned from Susan Shai. I know she's been on the show.
Yes.
And it's not exact. Now, I can do it exact if I want to, but I'm going to show you the inexact way today.
Okay.
I better put my glasses on.
I know the same feeling. I have to do that too. Fortunately, I'm not the one cutting.
Well, I'm not worried about cutting on the quilt show.
I guess that's true. You have definitely proved that.
Now, sometimes I will lay my rotary cutter out and cut it a 1/2 inch or a 1/4 inch all the way around. Oops, see, I kind of goofed up there, but that doesn't matter.
So you basically
I'm going to trim this corner up real
You've
quick.
kind of given yourself about a 1/2 inch all the way around, and sometimes it's a little more, sometimes it's a little less.
Right.
But that's okay.
Right, and there's
All
a
right.
quilt on the wall that I have a lot more because it's beautiful Ricky Tim's hand-dyed fabric, and I wanted a lot of that to show. So then I very carefully measure and precisely
Oh my gosh, you did
tear.
more on that side than the other side. I love tearing. The audience is laughing, but I'll tell you, all of our hand-dyed fabrics, it saves time and it feels good.
It feels great.
It's not for everything, okay? But when it's time to tear, it is time to tear.
We were talking before the segment, I love to tear silk.
Oh.
It's just delicious. Okay, so I'm going to get that.
The more you keep going with all these little one-liners, I'm not sure you're going to get to come back on the quilt show because you're freaking everybody out, Katie. You cut quilts up, you tear silk. Well, okay, we'll have you back.
The
I
raw
promise.
edge with silk is beautiful.
It is. Boom. Yes,
Yeah,
I know.
it is.
I
It's
agree.
beautiful. Okay, so this is easy peasy lemon squeezy, and I don't have this on here exactly, but close enough
You've
for
got it
rock
close
and roll.
enough for what we're doing, right?
Right. I'm going to just take this background or this backing fabric, fold my quilt top up, and fold the backing fabric onto the back. Now, I don't want empty space.
Okay,
And I don't want the batting folded.
roll. Yeah, I didn't want to roll
rolled.
up, so.
So I just kind of, and because I didn't cut it straight, it's probably not exactly straight. Then I put this back down. I have to always remember to pin it so I don't poke myself when I sew. And I like these nice, long, very sharp pins because I like to go in, out, in, out.
Twice.
Twice. So I just in, out, in, out.
So now, all right. So do you do the bottom, and then you do the top,
And then
or
I'm
the
going to do
opposite
the
side, I should
opposite
say.
side.
And you fall down, and you'll pin that.
And I'll pin that. And then, depending on what the fabric is in the back, sometimes I just like that little raw edge to show, and I'll just fold it like that.
Okay.
Sometimes, when I'm using beautiful Ricky Tim's hand-dyed fabric,
Oh, you do like a little.
I do just a little miter.
Like
and
a
I
little-
do the little miter like you would wrap a package.
Okay. So I think we all understand that part of it, but now how does it get finished off completely?
Well, several ways. I can take pearl cotton. Sometimes I take pearl cotton and stitch it around
That would be a
the
good
outside.
accent. Yeah.
Nice accent. Sometimes I take the blanket stitch on my machine and stitch the felt down. Usually when I'm using felt, that's what I do. That doesn't work so...
Like in a zigzag stitch or
No,
a,
that blanket.
The blanket stitch.
That's,
But you could use a zigzag.
you could easily
something
use
that's
a
gonna
zigzag.
go bite,
right,
bite, bite, bite.
Right, exactly.
Cool. Even a herringbone.
Even a herringbone.
that
You
would
could do
work.
any. It would
that's
be a
very
fun
cool.
way to experiment with your decorative stitches.
And with all the ways that we can couch things down, you could really even disguise that edge with all. I mean,
Absolutely.
You're just taking me on a journey now, because I wasn't thinking any of that till we just got there.
And we talked about, there are a couple quilts on the wall where I've used cotton fabric in this method.
And it makes a more frayed
Right.
edge.
I tear
and that
the top.
looks really good too.
But you could also take cotton fabric and fold the top under,
Oh, I see what you're saying.
and
yes.
then you'd have a finished
and finish
edge
on both sides. And do a that would be fabulous.
So it's just
Okay.
it's the cheater's way of getting a binding
It's
on a
the
quilt.
creative person's way of getting a binding on a quilt. And you've got one more. Let's look at the other one, because this is one way you can go about getting Tweedledee and Tweedledone. But there's one more.
One more. So here's a mandala that I've fused onto felt again, wool felt. And this isn't craft felt. It's difficult to find 100% wool felt. And we do have a quilting store here in town, and she sells a lot of wool.
In the Denver area.
In the Denver area. And one of the big craft stores, I don't know if I'm allowed to say the
Yes.
name, Joanne has, it's better than the acrylic craft wool.
Okay.
I try
and do you know
find,
the name of the store here?
Yes, it's called Fabric Expressions.
Yeah, let's
Yeah.
give them a shout out, because
Yep.
you might need some wool.
Yeah, and you can find it online. So this, I'm going to take, there's
No batting.
No batting, because I want to hand stitch this till I'm cross-eyed. So I don't want to
Okay.
have to hand stitch through more layers than I have to. We were talking earlier, SAQA's definition of a quilt is 2 or more layers held together by stitch. Some of the other organizations, the definition is 3 or more.
But you don't enter shows, so it doesn't matter.
Right, and if I entered a show, I'd add another layer.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Right. So what do we do?
So you decide the quilter decides how wide I want that to be.
So
That's-
seriously, you're just going to roll this over
Yeah.
and what, stitch it down?
I'm going to pin it like I did,
Well,
in,
but-
out,
Yeah, but
and
the
stitch
ultimate
it down.
goal, the ultimate goal is to get it. And again, do you do like the opposite sides?
Opposite sides, and I can miter the corner. I folded this one twice, so those aren't, I don't know.
That's
Anyway,
okay.
yeah.
It may not, because it's a little different size, but
Right.
the idea is that you would just come along here and stitch it the same way. And then
Exactly.
you don't have this guy being a raw edge on top of the other.
Right.
That's fun. That's Tweedledee and Tweedledone. Let's take a look at this one quilt that we've got over here. Bring it over to this playground. Alex, I need you. Because look at this. I mean, seriously, if you want to say, I'm done,
Yeah.
you Tweedledee and Tweedledone
Yeah,
it.
I think it's great.
And it's applique quilted, which, so I fused the cut up, the convergence,
Yes,
onto the felt,
yes.
layered it, folded all the edges under and everything, and then stitched.
Yeah, that's
Wow.
great. So
Now
it's all
stitched
done in
it
one
down.
step. What do you think, everybody? Let's go over here.
Okay.
Well, I love what you showed us today, and it's totally different from the other show. And at the top of the show, we mentioned your book, but we never said the title of it or anything like that. It's an artist's journey through Wonderland, and it's quickly Alice's journey and how she responds to different things,
Right.
people, etc. And it parallels our creative journey many
Yes.
times.
Yes, it does.
Yeah.
And it kind of parallels life's journey. And it's kind of what we were talking about earlier. You figure out who you are and what you want to do, and then give yourself permission to do it.
Can I also say give other people the permission to be themselves as well? Because so many times we go, oh, I can't believe you do that because I would never do that. But it's okay.
Right.
Give other people permission.
Right. And, I was speaking, and I've been doing some teaching. I'm getting wonderful feedback, and I love it. But I had an 83-year-old woman come up to me, take both my hands, and she had tears in her eyes. And she said, I'm 83 years old, and I want you to know this is the first time I've ever felt like I have permission.
Ugh,
And,
that's inspiring and sad at the same time.
well, we get so many messages in our world about what we should be, how we should be.
And I'm going to tell you, have Katie to your guild. It's just plain and simple, you know? So, Ricky, first, thank you for your baby bunty.
Yeah.
welcome.
Yeah, and all those different ways you could do it. Kind of like working with Katie's color wheel, huh?
Yeah.
Hey, and Katie, lady, we love you. Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you so much for having me back.
Congratulations on your tool. I think it's smashing.
Thank you. Thanks.
Hey, everybody, I hope you've enjoyed today. I hope you've been inspired. And remember, it's a new day
Every day.